All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this problem of the day. Be sure to answer the questions that I ask out loud and think about how your work is the same or different from what we talk about. Remember, there are a lot of different ways to represent and solve story problems. So what's the big question in this problem? Say it out loud. Right, how much money does Calvin have left after he buys a new canvas stretcher? And how did you represent that? Say it out loud. Yeah, there's a lot of ways that you could do it, but they all have to show the cost of the stretcher being taken away from the total amount of money that he had. So this is total money, right? Minus the cost of the stretcher, and that will equal the money that is left. Okay, great. And what's the little question that we have to answer first before we can actually answer that big question? Go ahead and say it out loud. Yeah, we gotta know how much money he has in total, right? Well, how would we represent that? Say it out loud. Sure, we have to represent the total as the amount that he earned from selling his large paintings plus the amount that he earned from selling his small paintings. So why don't we put A, and that can be the money from the large paintings, plus S, and that can be the money from the small paintings, right? And we know that will equal T, which is the total dollars that he has. All right, well, what about these two? How do we represent those two amounts? Say it out loud. Right. For the large paintings, we'll take 6 because he sold 6, right, large paintings. And we'll multiply that times 256 because that is the amount that he charges for each large painting. That will give us the amount of money that he made from the large paintings. And then for the small ones, we're going to take 11, right? Because he had sold 11 small paintings. Multiply that by 78. That's how much he charges for each small painting. And that will give us the amount of money that he made off the small paintings. Awesome. So how were we able to figure out what the big and the little questions were in this problem? Say it out loud. Right, the big question is what the problem is asking us to figure out. And the little questions are the questions that we have to answer first in order to answer the big question. Read this with me. What is the big question? And what are all the little questions I need to answer first? Those are key points that we've had before. We have them again today because they are so important. Okay, and why was it important that we represent all parts of that story problem before we go ahead and try to solve it? Say it out loud. Yeah, representing first helps us make a plan for how to solve and keep us organized. There's a lot going on with these problems. So we have to make sure that we're representing first before we solve, and that's why I captured this here. We represent all parts with labels before we solve the problem. Okay, so I want you to take a minute and look at your representation. If it doesn't represent all the problem, go ahead and pause the video and revise it now. All right, great. So at this point, we should all have representations that fully represent the problem. So yesterday we talked about estimating before solving. Why would that be a good idea? Say it out loud. Right, it helps us to know if our answers are reasonable. And we know that 256 is closer to 300 than 200. So I'm going to do some mental estimation, right? So 256, like I said, we know it's closer to 300 than 200. So I'm going to estimate that as 300. You could use a number line to do this as well. If you need to, that's totally fine. And then once we have this as 300, I'm going to take 6 times 300, right? That's going to give me 1,800. And then for this multiplication problem, I'm going to estimate these numbers. I'm going to round 11 to 10. I'm going to round 78 to 80. Those are the closest tens to each of those numbers. And I'm going to take 10 times 80, and that's going to give me 800. Okay? And then all I have to do is add 1,800 plus 800, and it gives me an estimate of 2,600 for the total amount of dollars that he made. And what would I do now to go ahead and finish out my estimate? Say it out loud. Right, so now I can take 889. That is pretty close to 900. So I could take 2,600, subtract 900, and that's going to give me an estimate of $1,700. Let's label that as the estimate. Great. We can use that to help us think about if the actual answer that we get is reasonable and makes sense. Okay, so let's go ahead now and we'll work out our actual answer. What do we need to do? Say it out loud. Right. We need to multiply 6 times 256 and 11 times 78. And we can use our area model to help us find the partial products, right, and add those together to find the total product for each multiplication number sentence. So I'm going to quickly set that up. 6 times 256. 6 times 200 is 1,200. 6 times 50 is 300. 6 times 6 is 36, so we add those together. We get 1,536 there, and then we'll do, right, 10 and 1 makes 11, 70 and 8 makes 78, 10 times 70 is 700, 10 times 8 is 80, 70 times 1 is 70, and 8 times 1 is 8. So let's add those partial products as well. $851. Great, now what? Oops, sorry, that's a mistake. This should be an 8, not a 1. Apologies, 858. Sorry about that. So, now what? Right, we need to add 1,536 and 858 together. Okay. 1,536 plus 858. 6 times 8 is 14. Carry that 1. 9, 13, 1, 2,394. And then, what's the last thing we need to do? Say it out loud. Right, 2,394, that's the total amount of dollars that he made. Now I have to subtract 889, because that was the cost of the stretcher. So I'll go ahead and do that. So we get 1,505. Is that a reasonable answer? How do you know? Say it out loud. Yeah, given the size of the numbers that we're working with in this problem and the number of operations that we had to do, 1,505 is pretty close to 1,700. And 1,505 is less than what we found to be the total amount that he made of 2,394, which also tells us that would be an answer that would make sense. So he had $1,505 left over.